Deep inside the Malaysian jungle, Chinese workers are drilling tunnels so long, you could line up 10 football fields inside them end to end. They are laying track across rivers, cutting through mountains, building elevated bridges above rainforests that have never seen a train in their entire existence. And Malaysia is just one stop. The same push is happening in Laos, where a Chinese-built railway already connects the landlocked country directly to southern China. It is being extended toward Thailand right now, pushing the tracks further south. And the destination at the end of all of it is Singapore, the financial capital sitting at the very tip of Asia. China is building a single connected rail corridor that runs from its own border all the way down through 8 countries to the equator. This is part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, a global strategy to build infrastructure across Asia, Africa, and Europe. And in doing so, make trade faster, cheaper, and more dependent on routes that China helps control. The goal is not just to move people. It is to move oil, raw materials, and manufactured goods across land, instead of relying entirely on crowded sea lanes. Now, let's talk about the $16 billion railway sitting at the center of this plan, what it took to build it, why it almost never happened, and what it actually means for the future of an entire region. To understand why China picked Malaysia as one of the most critical links in this network, you first need to understand a problem Malaysia has been living with for decades. And once you see it, China's involvement starts to make complete sense. Malaysia looks connected on a map. It does not function like one. On the west coast, you have Kuala Lumpur, Port Klang, and most of the country's industry packed into a relatively small area. According to Malaysian government economic data, the Klang Valley alone produces more than 30% of Malaysia's entire economic output. It is the engine of the whole country, handling the majority of trade, manufacturing, and logistics activity. Port Klang processes over 13 million containers every year, making it one of the busiest ports in all of Southeast Asia. But move east, and everything changes almost immediately. States like Kelantan and Pahang have fewer industries, slower development, and roads that were never built to handle heavy freight at any serious scale. If a company on the East Coast needs to ship goods to the West, it cannot go in a straight line. It has to wind through mountain roads and difficult terrain that brings heavy trucks to a crawl. Moving cargo between the two coasts can take from 12 to 15 hours by road, depending on conditions. That is not just inconvenient. It is a structural barrier to growth that has held the eastern states back for a very long time. And it does not stop there. Malaysia sits directly on the Strait of Malacca, one of the most important waterways on the planet. According to global shipping data, more than 90,000 ships pass through this narrow stretch of water every year, carrying oil from the Middle East, electronics from China, raw materials from Southeast Asia, and manufactured goods heading to Europe. Every single one of those ships has to sail around the entire tip of the Malaysian peninsula to get from one side to the other. That adds time, fuel, and cost to a route the global economy depends on every single day. This is the gap China saw. A country sitting on the world's busiest trade lane, with a massive east-west divide that no one had been able to fix, and a geography that made fixing it extraordinarily difficult. For China, solving Malaysia's infrastructure problem and advancing its own regional ambitions were the same move. That is why the East Coast Rail Link was born, and that is why China is the one building it. The East Coast Rail Link, known as the ECRL, is a long-distance railway that cuts directly across Peninsula Malaysia from west to east. The full route covers about 665 kilometers. It starts at Port Klang on the west coast, pushes inland through the Kuala Lumpur region, crosses the Central Mountain Range, reaches Kuantan on the east coast, and extends further north to Koh near the border with Thailand. That last point matters enormously. We will come back to it. The railway is built on standard gauge track 1,435 millimeters wide. This is the same standard used in high-speed and heavy freight systems worldwide, which means higher speeds, better stability, and heavier cargo loads compared to Malaysia's older rail network. Passenger trains will run at up to 160 kilometers per hour. Freight trains will carry millions of tons of cargo annually once the line is fully running. More than 20 stations are planned along the route, including cargo terminals and logistics hubs placed directly next to industrial zones, so factories can load freight onto trains without long truck journeys in between. But building this railway was never just a matter of clearing land and laying track. Right through the center of the peninsula sits the Titiwangsa Range, a 480-kilometer wall of steep rock, dense jungle, and unstable slopes. There is no going around it. The railway has to go through it. And doing that pushed engineers into some of the most complex work in Southeast Asian construction history. The project includes more than 40 tunnels with a combined length of over 50 kilometers. One single tunnel alone stretches over 16 kilometers, making it one of the longest railway tunnels anywhere in the region. These tunnels pass through hard rock in some places and softer, more unstable ground in others. That means the same method cannot be used throughout. Some sections use massive tunnel boring machines that grind through rock continuously. Other sections require drill and blast work, where teams manually drill holes, place controlled explosives, and carefully remove rock piece by piece, section by section. Around 30 to 40% of the entire route runs on elevated viaducts, lifting the track above rivers, flood-prone land, and uneven terrain. Malaysia receives more than 2,500 millimeters of rainfall every year in many parts of the country, according to national meteorological data. Monsoon seasons bring flooding, landslides, and soil movement that can destroy infrastructure quickly if it is not engineered to handle those forces from day one. Every bridge, every tunnel entry, every elevated section has to be designed to survive decades of extreme weather, not just the conditions on a clear construction morning. Then there is the access problem. Large sections of the route pass through remote areas where no roads exist at all. Before construction could even begin in those sections, workers had to build temporary access roads, set up camps, and move heavy machinery into terrain that had never seen equipment at this scale. The workforce is a mix of local Malaysian workers and Chinese engineers and specialists, with thousands of people deployed across different sections at the same time. China Communications Construction Company, one of the largest infrastructure firms in the world, is the main contractor. The financing came primarily through China's Export-Import Bank. The original cost was set at around 65 billion Malaysian ringgit, roughly 16 billion US dollars, making it one of the most expensive infrastructure projects in Malaysian history. For a while, construction moved forward. Then, in 2018, a new Malaysian government came to power and suspended the project entirely. The concern was not the railway itself. It was the terms. Was the debt too large? Were the financing conditions tilted too heavily in China's favor? Was Malaysia getting real value for $16 billion? These were legitimate questions, and the government decided it needed answers before construction continued. This is the point where the ECRL could have ended permanently. Projects suspended at this scale rarely come back, but Malaysia did not cancel it. Instead, the government went back to the negotiating table and pushed hard for better terms. After months of difficult negotiations, the cost was brought down to around 44 billion ringgit, a reduction of roughly 1/3. Parts of the route were adjusted to cut complexity, and in 2019, construction resumed. That renegotiation is one of the most important parts of this story. Malaysia had enough leverage to push back against one of the world's largest construction powers and walk away with a meaningfully better deal. China agreed to new terms, rather than walking away entirely, which tells you something important. China needed this railway built not just for Malaysia's sake, but because of where this railway sits inside a much larger plan that has been in motion for years. Zoom out from Malaysia and the full picture starts to come into view. The ECRL does not just solve a domestic infrastructure problem. It is one link in a chain that China is assembling across all of Southeast Asia, a chain designed to connect the entire region by rail, from China's southern border all the way down to Singapore. This is the Pan-Asian Railway, sometimes called the Kunming-Singapore Railway. The concept is a continuous rail corridor that passes through Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, and terminates in Singapore. When complete, it would allow freight and passengers to travel by train from Kunming in southern China to the southern tip of Asia without ever needing a ship or a plane. That is thousands of kilometers of connected track running through 8 countries, all under a network that China is financing and building. And this is not just a future concept, it is already being built, section by section. The China-Laos Railway opened in December 2021. It covers over 1,000 kilometers from Kunming down to Vientiane, the capital of Laos. Before this line existed, Laos was one of the most landlocked and economically isolated countries in Southeast Asia. Goods moved slowly. Access to regional markets was limited. The railway changed that almost overnight. Within a couple of years of opening, freight volumes were growing according to regional trade reports. Chinese businesses were establishing themselves in Laos at a pace the country had never seen, and cargo that used to take days to move by road was crossing the border in hours. Laos went from a country that was hard to reach to a country sitting at the center of a growing regional network. From Laos, the corridor continues south into Thailand. A high-speed rail project connecting Vientiane to Bangkok is currently under construction, pushing the tracks further down the peninsula. From Bangkok, the plan extends toward the Malaysian border, and that is exactly where the northern end of the ECRL comes in. The line terminates near Kota Bharu, right at the edge of Thailand. In June 2024, China's premier officially stated China's readiness to study linking the ECRL with railway networks in Laos and Thailand. That is a sitting head of government making a formal commitment to completing the chain. If all of these connections are finished, a train could leave Kunming in southern China and travel by rail through Laos, through Thailand, across Malaysia, and arrive in Singapore without a single transfer to a ship or a plane. The ECRL is not just Malaysia's solution to its east-west divide. It is the Malaysian section of a rail corridor that stretches from China's doorstep to the equator. Now connect this back to the Belt and Road Initiative. The BRI is China's global infrastructure investment strategy, covering roads, ports, railways, and pipelines across Asia, Africa, and Europe. The stated goal is to improve connectivity between countries and make trade faster and cheaper. The practical effect, according to multiple regional economic studies, is that countries using Chinese-built infrastructure develop deep, long-term dependencies on Chinese construction standards, Chinese equipment, Chinese financing arrangements, and increasingly Chinese involvement in operating the systems after they are built. In 2024, a Malaysia-China joint venture was officially formed to operate and maintain the ECRL after construction is complete. China's involvement in this railway does not end when the last track is laid. It continues for decades. For China, the railway network across Southeast Asia also addresses one of its most pressing strategic concerns, the Strait of Malacca. That narrow stretch of water between Malaysia and Indonesia handles more than 90,000 ships a year. Chinese oil imports, raw material shipments, and export goods all depend heavily on this single passage. If it were ever disrupted, blocked, or controlled by a rival power, the consequences for China's economy would be severe. A land-based rail corridor through Southeast Asia gives China an overland alternative. It does not replace the strait. The volume of global shipping is far too large for that. But it reduces the risk of depending on a single choke point for time-sensitive cargo, for goods that do not need to travel by ship, and for supply chains that want flexibility. A train from Kunming to Singapore changes the calculation entirely. For Malaysia, the ECRL solves a problem that has been compounding for decades. Once the railway is operational, freight that used to take up to 15 hours by road across the peninsula will move in a fraction of that time. Industrial zones along the route will have direct rail access to Port Klang, plugging the East Coast into one of the busiest ports in Southeast Asia for the first time at this scale. The railway also creates what trade experts call a land bridge. A container arriving at Port Klang from the Middle East or Europe does not always need to reboard a ship to reach the South China Sea side of the peninsula. It can transfer to rail, cross the country, and reach East Coast ports faster than a vessel sailing around the tip of Malaysia. For time-sensitive cargo and manufacturers on tight supply chain schedules, that option carries real commercial value. Malaysia moves from being a country goods flow around to a country goods flow through. For the broader region, the implications multiply with every section of track completed. Countries that were hard to reach become accessible. Supply chains that ran entirely by sea gain a reliable land-based alternative. Laos has already begun experiencing this shift. Thailand will follow. Malaysia is next. And eventually, Singapore, already the financial hub of Southeast Asia, would become the southern terminus of a railway that begins in China. As of 2026, construction on the ECRL is active across multiple sections simultaneously. The tunnels through the Titiwangsa Range are progressing steadily through difficult geological conditions. In flatter sections, elevated structures, bridge spans, and station foundations are already taking visible shape. The current target for completion falls between 2026 and 2027. With phased openings expected for certain sections before the full line is ready end-to-end. China is not constructing one railway in one country as a standalone investment. It is assembling a network where every completed section increases the value and the urgency of finishing the next one. Each project viewed alone looks like a country, addressing a local infrastructure need. Viewed together, they trace the outline of a system that will reshape how an entire region moves, trades, and connects for the next 100 years. For the countries along this route, the central question is not whether this connectivity is valuable. It clearly is. The real question is what it means to have that infrastructure built, financed, and partly operated by a single foreign power, and how each country manages that relationship as the network grows more complete and more deeply embedded in daily economic life. China is not building one railway. It is building a region's future, one section of track at a time. And the $16 billion stretch cutting through the Malaysian jungle is one of the most important pieces of that future being laid down right now. Do you think this rail network is the best thing to happen to Southeast Asia in a generation? Or are there trade-offs the region needs to think more carefully about? Drop your honest take in the comments. If this video helped you see what's actually being built across Southeast Asia, hit like and subscribe because more videos on China's infrastructure push across the region are coming very soon.